Let's shift to look at an international focus. And I wanted to look at Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan, but beginning with Obama's recent proposal on withdrawal, or his discussion of withdrawal.
There's a very striking feature of the whole debate about withdrawal. I mean, it is being debated, like Nancy Pelosi doesn't like it, and somebody else does like it, and somebody else says it's too fast. There's one voice missing, Iraqis. I mean, does anybody say what Iraqis want? Now, we know what they want. They compelled the United States to accept the Status of Forces Agreement, which the U.S. didn't want. It struggled all the way to prevent it, just as it has struggled all the way to prevent any form of democracy in Iraq. I mean, the U.S. tried to prevent elections. When it was forced to accept elections, it tried to subvert them, succeeded to an extent, but not completely. In fact, when the SOFA, Status of Forces Agreement, was being debated, the commentary in the press was quite intriguing. What was said standardly is that Maliki, who they hoped was our man, is giving in to popular pressure. He doesn't really mean it. You know, he's forced to appease the public when he says you have to have a timetable. But of course he doesn't really mean it. It's an interesting concept. Like, if suppose he was responding to popular pressure, that's bad, you know. I mean, the hatred of democracy is so intense and deeply rooted that it's taken for granted that if a political leader is responding to the public and not to us, there's something wrong, and maybe he doesn't really mean it, so we can go on. But he did mean it. And finally, I guess it was about November 2007, the Bush administration laid out its conception of the Status of Forces Agreement, which was, you know, permanent bases, give priority to American corporations in oil development, exploration, series of measures. They're all out of the SOFA. The U.S. had to agree. Now, what actually happened, I think, is that there's been a tremendous victory for nonviolent mass resistance for the last 6 years. A significant victory. I mean, the U.S. could kill insurgents, but couldn't deal with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. And therefore, step by step, it's backed off. Now, of course, this is going to be interpreted as a great victory. But on the contrary, it means giving up the war aims. And Obama is trying to sustain them. To keep 50,000 troops there means to keep an occupation. 50,000, you count logistics and so on. You know, pretty soon you got 100,000, and then try to hang on to what you can. But Iraqis have been very explicit about this. Now, maybe you can sort of beat leadership over the head so they'll say they're going along. In other words, disregard public opinion. But that's what the real debate should be about. And in fact, we should be saying nothing about the rate of withdrawal. It's not the role of the aggressors to decide when to withdraw. When the Russians invaded Afghanistan, we didn't suggest it's their decision. Should they withdraw fast? Should they withdraw slow? You know, they leave 50,000 troops there. I mean, they have no business being there. Okay, so get out. But when it's us, since tacitly we own the world, we decide. And Iraqis literally are not mentioned. Read the discussion, it's not there. So yes, there's discussion among sectors of power in the United States as to try to finesse the demand of Iraqis so that we can still get what we want. And it's extremely interesting to see the way this is put. I guess maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, the Times they have a kind of a monthly report from Iraq by two leading specialists, Michael O'Hanlon and Kenneth Pollack, and they had their big report. And they were warning that the situation in Iraq is very unstable and it's of enormous strategic importance, all of which is correct. The truth is sort of leaking out. You can't talk about, you know, the fake war aims anymore. And they happen to say on the side that if Iraq collapses into chaos, it will be hard to pressure Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia to make the hard decisions required to accept peace with Israel. Now that's a very intriguing example of how ideological fanaticism with constant media and public reiteration, can completely invert the truth with nobody noticing. I mean, there's no problem getting Jordan, Syria, and Saudi Arabia to agree. They agreed 30 years ago. You know, I mean, the U.S. in fact had to veto a Security Council resolution back in 1976 that they introduced, calling for a two-state settlement on the international border, and it's up to the present. It's the U.S. that's blocking it, and has been for over 30 years. Obama himself has made it explicit that he continues to block it. But facts are just irrelevant in an atmosphere of religious fanaticism. The religion here is just state worship. So it must be somebody else who's causing the problems, even if, you know, the facts are so crystal clear in this case. They could hardly be clearer in a complex situation, but it's inverted. Going back to the withdrawal from Iraq, whatever you think of the elected Iraqi government, they're missing, and the same is true in Afghanistan. I mean, recently there's been very harsh criticism in the press of Karzai, President Karzai. Why? Is he different than he was 2 years ago when he was a hero? Well, yeah, he's different in two crucial respects. First of all, his first message to Obama, which as far as I know remains unanswered, is that the U.S. should stop killing Afghan civilians. Well, you know, that's not appropriate. But his second statement was even worse. He called for a timetable for withdrawal of foreign troops. Well, you know, now we're getting really intolerable. So he's now a bad guy. We've got to do something about him, bypass him, and so on. But that's true. That's his position. We don't exactly know the details about public opinion in Afghanistan, but it very likely is public opinion to the extent that we know. There's a substantial peace movement in Afghanistan. It's had conferences, jirgas, brings together large segments of the population, and they're basically calling for an end to violence and a move towards diplomacy. They're not opposed to having outside forces there if they're there for reconstruction, not destruction, which is quite a big difference. I mean, even in the mainstream, like Foreign Affairs, the establishment journal, you can read harsh critique of the idea that we have to aim for military victory, and recognition that it's going to have to involve internal reconciliation, meaning with the Taliban, which is what a large majority of the population want, according to Western-run polls, and also regional involvement, meaning Iran, Russia, India, and so on, all of China, all of which have interests, and that's what's recommended by specialists, like happens to be Barnett Rubin and Ahmed Rashid in this case, but many others. Well, Obama's going the opposite direction: military victory, increasing military force, and again, Afghan voices, though not unknown, are not part of this discussion. So in this sense, it's like Iraq.